Yesterday, for example, this room was packed with maybe 100 young people. We had farm labor organizers here. We had city officials. We had folks from various universities across the state. We have folks coming in from El Paso, Rhode Island, Michigan. And we had a bunch of USDA principals here who, including we had 2 pastors as well sitting in here in the front row. And so it was a very vibrant discussion around food systems. And this last day in particular, these last 2 days, we have been talking about food systems as it relates to the Rio Grande Valley. For some of you guys who are out of town, you guys are in a really special place because the Rio Grande Valley is one of the most vibrant agricultural areas in the country. We produce more fruits and vegetables than anywhere else in the state. And in that context, we also, we have some of the biggest issues around food, where a lot of our folks don't have access to food, healthy food. We have a lot of food-related diseases, and we have a lot of our population who are underpaid and overworked when it comes to their contributions to the food system. So I want to just provide a brief context before we introduce the panel. This panel, as well as the previous 5 panels, are discussing central themes to a discussion that we've been having over the last 18 months, where we have had a number of different voices invited to participate in a working group to help articulate a vision that we have as a region for what we think is a healthy, fair, and sustainable food system, and one that is actually prosperous for everyone. So over the last 18 months, we've put together some ideas and concepts, and we've articulated in this mission statement or this vision that we have published in this small handout, and there's some located in the back. And in there, you can read at the very back what that resolution looks like for these groups. So, of course, there's some statements there around farm worker justice. There's some statements there around food engagement with our youth. And there's a statement there as well as how we harvest and distribute our food. So this panel in particular is talking about local school food procurement, because it was identified by our working group as one of those screws that we can turn that has a really disproportionate impact on the health and well-being of our region. So this panel today is going to talk they're going to have talk amongst themselves and with you guys about ideas and that vision about how school food procurement can actually help contribute to that healthy, sustainable, and fair food system. So let me introduce our moderator. We have Ms. Carmen Ocañez Lerma, who has been with our working group since day one. She was the child nutrition administrator with Region 1 before she retired just this year. That's why she looks so vibrant and rested. We also have Mr. Abraham Lopez, who's with the FAR San Juan Alamo ISD. We have next to him Bella Wood, who's representing Verdant Exchange, a food intermediary company. I'm sure you'll talk about that. And then we also have Alan Williams, who now is with Region 1 Educational Support Center. So let me turn it over to you, Ms. Carmen.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I want to start off the conversation by sharing just a brief story of where I've been and what I've done. I spent 34 years in child nutrition in the K-12. So I was an assistant director, and then I became a director, and then I went on to Region 1 to be the administrator. As a food service director, that was probably the most challenging career. You have to be you have to be a therapist, you have to be an electrician, you have to be a plumber, a menu planner, a dietitian, and it is just a lot of complex work involved with that. So I was very blessed to go to the service center, not knowing that I was going to inherit 46 school districts instead of just one, right? So what was I thinking? And my role at the service center for 10 years was to support school districts, all the K-12, to manage all the grants that they were receiving from USDA and the TDA, right, the Texas Department of Agriculture. So my role was to train, to provide technical assistance, to make sure that the districts and all the directors had all of the resources available to them to be successful in their job. And that meant the procurement, menu planning, passing with flying colors their federal audit, which everybody stresses over that, right? Becomes such a huge stressor. It was something that happened every 3 years, and now it's something that happens every 5 years. But then sometimes they go back, well, no, it's going to be 4. So you're always on pins and needles about when this is going to happen and what are they going to look at. And so in that career journey, I saw a lot of districts doing great, great things. And then I also saw some that, through no fault of their own, didn't fare as well because they just didn't have the resources. And one of those areas was the procurement of produce and locally grown, and what defines and what is a local grown item. So I know that you already heard a lot of the technicalities involved in that in the Thursday session, but I want our moderators to talk a little bit more about what it looks like moving forward. And I look at the panel and I think, well, if only everybody could have an Abraham, right? What would that look like? And what would it look like for a school district to have somebody that is well-trained and have somebody, such a strong resource like Abraham that is, I don't want to say drinking the Kool-Aid, but he is really strong and advocates and really believes in that. And before I let him answer, I want to share another story about my journey through the food service directorship in McAllen. My very first year back in 2000, I traveled to Dallas, Texas for a conference, and there was a woman there presenting the Farm to School program. And there was going to be a pilot. So I went up to her, and I was a really young director, and I went up to her and I told her, I want to be part of this pilot. I want to be part of the Farm to School, and what does that entail? And she said, well, it includes you using your USDA money to purchase and allot for oranges, grapefruit, watermelon, carrots, and celery. And it's limited, so there's only maybe 5% of your allotment is going to go to this. And I said, well, I want to do it. And she said, yeah, it's not for you, it's for the Dallas area. And I thought, well, that's strange. Where is the fruit coming from, right? The oranges. And mind you, this is 20 years ago. And she mentioned all the farms in Mission, and I said, that's where I live. And my kitchen is a mile away from that farm. So you mean to tell me that you're going to load all this produce to bring it all the way to Dallas for a Farm to School pilot, and I can't be a part of that pilot? And she smiled, and yeah, that's correct. So one of the things that we were talking about with the panel also with Bella was where in some instances, common sense has really gone out the window, right? So that's also my other question. How do we get that common sense to make its way back? So I'm gonna have Abraham address first. How do you, and then when we get to Bella, we will talk about the common sense aspect.
Good morning. Thank you. They call me the Kool-Aid man for a reason, right? So I've been blessed. I've had 3 different bosses throughout my 5 years at PSJ, but they've all been open-minded enough to let me do what I do. You know, I like to say that my first boss was like, I have no clue what you do, but go for it. Love your passion. I'm all behind you. And as I started educating them about the importance of buying local, eating local, outside, let's say you don't care about the nutrition side, which we should, right, with the food nutrition, but just saying, hey, this money stays in our community. It's not going anywhere. It's staying here local. If you care about money, that's one way I've approached, right? But for those, I tell them the importance of eating local, right? We have USDA pushing farm fresh, TDA pushing all these things. So before, when I first started, it was kind of in the background. You kind of heard of it. It was another program out of the 15, 20 going on. And I understood them from their point of view that it was not at the forefront. But now, thankfully to USDA, TDA pushing these, it's now the child nutrition directors are looking at the farmers and saying, you know what, remember that guy that came 5 years ago? Maybe he was onto something, right? But I'm glad it's finally changing and we have that momentum, but it's up to us at the school districts to capitalize on that and say, you know what, if that's where the wind is taking us, let's go, let's embrace it, right? We don't want to be told to do it. We want to be the ones leading the effort. So that's how I feel, being open-minded. And if for those farmers that are discouraged, right, it took, when I first started, it took one of our farmers 2 years to get in contact with us. And I felt bad for her, right? And I'm like, she takes time out of her day, so let me do the best that I can to get her into our system. Now it takes me about a month to add new vendors, which I'm super proud of that. But I feel for them when they go and they just get a no, or a I don't know, or send me an email. I get that, and I feel it's up to me that I work in the system to provide the best meals that I can for my kids, because I'm envisioning my kids are going to go to this school district, my school district, and I want to feed them the best food that I can give them. And that's my thought process. That's what leads me to push for that. And if anyone needs help on their school district, or just reach out to me. I'll help you out.
They have your email address, yes?
Yes.
Send me an email.
Send me an email, but I will answer.
Bella, would you like to add to what Abraham, or do you want to move forward with the common sense comment that I made?
I think thinking. I think thinking about the common sense piece of things is where the common sense can come from is the collaboration that can happen on this screen, in this room. It's a pleasure to work with both of them and be partners in how to do this and how to really make it move forward. And the common sense comes in building a system that's effective for farmers, for buyers, and for everyone who's in between. I think we all have the same goal of feeding kids healthy food, and what will come from that is, coordinating an effective pathway to get that there. And we want kids to eat healthy food. We want money to stay in the RGV. We want to see those things happen. And effective value chain coordination doesn't need to have a bunch of steps. It doesn't need to be challenging when we all have the same information and we are able to work together. So that's the common sense piece, is let's do it. Let's work together to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the pinch and the pressure of feeling, we're trying to make this square peg fit into a circle. Those days need to be over. They need to be over, and we need to make better sense of what are the needs. And one of the comments that we were making before the panel was school districts or the K-12 market can quickly move over to just trying to pass an audit versus why we're really there. And we're really there to feed kids and a wholesome and nutritious meal, not highly processed food items, right? And so how do we get there, and how do we lean towards menus that include more locally grown products? And I'm looking at Alan, and I know that this one is a hard one, but Alan is always prepared, and so I'll let you tackle that one.
Hello. Good morning. I guess the battery's not okay. Hire more Abrahams. Let me take a couple of steps back first. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. For me personally, it's incredibly important that we have our little kids, the kindergartens, the first graders, the elementary school kids, involved in being stewards of the land, planting and participating in vegetable gardens on school campuses. I had been at PSJA ISD for 10 years prior to coming over to Region 1, but I came on as their habitat specialist. And where our focus was a partnership with U.S. Fish and Wildlife in getting native plants planted on school campuses. And we had a really neat project going on with them. And when Abraham came on, we had started working on school gardens, but I didn't have enough staff to really advance those school gardens. And so Abraham, through Child Nutrition, there were funds that were available to purchase seeds, purchase seedlings, purchase materials to create these vegetable gardens, edible gardens on school campuses. And so I was so excited to have Abraham come on, because I think the children participating is a link to the principals and the administrators, and seeing up the scale of decision makers that help to hire people like Abraham that understands the farm to school program and its overall intent. And I just learned this week, and correct me if I'm wrong in here, and I'll thank the Kellogg Foundation for sponsoring this food summit. And it's my understanding that it was the Kellogg Foundation that actually started the farm to school whole concept. And from that, it's not only is it getting the local foods into the local school districts, it's also getting the student body to be aware of and have a understanding and a relationship with those local farmers and where that food is coming from. So I know I didn't answer your question exactly, but I think that's an overarching framework that we all need to be aware of. And to me, as Abraham has mentioned a lot, maybe y'all haven't heard it, but it's one thing to buy really healthy, fresh, local foods, but then it's another thing to get the child to eat it. And from Child Nutrition, they actually are having to document, is the food and what quantity of food is actually going into the child's mouth. And we all know as parents, sometimes it's not real easy to get the kids, our children, to eat what we're asking them to eat. But that is a responsibility and a grading, I guess, a metric that is being kept and tracked at the school district. So to me, if you want a child to eat a piece of broccoli, the best thing to do is have them plant the seed or the seedling, nurture it, have the teachers go out, learn within that setting, and they're a lot more likely to eat that broccoli and enjoy it, or at least be willing to swallow it. And then might have that opportunity to say, hey, I can eat broccoli in the school cafeteria.
And eventually remove the cheese on top, where they just eat the broccoli by itself, right?
Amen.
Because we all know that little kids love cheesy, anything with cheese on top, they're going to consume it. So we have to find ways also to remove those things that change the profile of the item, to not add more processed things on top of it, to hide it, right, from the students. So I have another story to share really quickly, and then I will have the panelists, chime in on what that could look like. And I love to think outside the box. So again, I was traveling. I met up with a food service director that was the former director of Dallas ISD, and he had already gotten the big job. He had gone and become the director for Los Angeles Unified School Districts, where they had like 1,000 schools. Very interesting man. And so I asked him about how do you procure produce, because it's in Texas, that the Texas Education Agency allows for produce. You don't have to bid it or quote it because it's a volatile market. However, you have to follow the USDA federal regulation that says, oh no, you need to get quotes and you need to procure that correctly, because everything does, right? So I asked this gentleman, how do you do it? And he leaned back, he laughs, and he says, oh, Carmen, we are so big, I tell the farmer what to grow. And he showed me his menu, and he said, I tell him, this is what I want, and this is the quantity I want, and we sign a contract, and they go off. And it's multiple, it's not just one farmer, it's several people. But I don't venture outside of the seasonality wheel. I am not going to menu something that is not on the menu, and then my farmer is out there trying to figure out how is he going to pull this off, right? So it was based on the season, and he would tell him the quantity that he needed. Of course, that is a huge, huge, huge district and a huge operation. And of course, they have plentiful land, right? So if we had, right, I mean, we're a drawing board. what would that look like for an area in the valley where we could say, I'm going to tell the farmer what to grow? Abraham?
So my approach, since we're just starting, was never to tell the farmer what to grow, but to incorporate what they already grow into my menu. And that's how I started, right? I wanted something easy, and I was surprised to see that most of the stuff we currently have in our menu, they're growing already, right? Cabbage, romaine lettuce, almost some of them. But kale was something that we didn't have in our menu. But knowing what grows locally was also a big challenge for me. I just couldn't go online and type, what do our farmers growing down in the valley, right? So that was a big ask, and that's where the farmers come into play, right, for the menu planning. But we need to understand that we have buying power as well. We have 30,000 students in our district, and it's a good chunk. But if other school districts like myself, Brownsville, Mission, Edinburgh get together, then we could potentially have that buying power the people in LA have, right? Because my 30,000 with their 30,000 with their 30, now we're talking about almost 100,000 kids. So that's when we can potentially say, hey, farmers, we'll make a contract with you. And it's that, I always say, if someone needs to take the risk, it's us. Because if we fail, we'll get bailed out, you know? But if the farmer fails, that's his livelihood. That's his farm. That's his life. So if someone should be taking the risk, it should be us. And, you know, I'm not a director, so I can't dictate, right? So I can only push my ideas. But that's where my mentality comes from. So right now, I'm thinking, I'll buy your access until we establish that connection that now you're growing with me. Not maybe through contract, but we have that mutual trust of you willing to take that risk. They're already taking enough risk as it is, right? But we create that trust of you're willing to plant until we can get enough buying power with all our school districts. I would love to see an RGV coalition of child nutrition, right? Saying, hey, we're willing to make a contract if you grow for all of us. So that I'm excited to see that happening. Or maybe it's a coalition of farmers that get together and say, hey, would you willing to sign all of us together, right? It doesn't have to come from us, it could come from you all. And that's what we use to either pressure or convince our folks at the child nutrition side, let's do it, you know?
Yeah, and I love what you just said there about coalition building and what that could look like. And I think it can go both directions. Let's build a coalition of schools and a coalition of farmers, and then have effective middlemen who can make that work. You know, working with Region 1 for an exchange, the whole point is to be able to mitigate the administrative burden and the logistical challenges. So how can we build coalitions, like you said, to make these things stronger and to be able to be more effective in reaching more students? Because that's the whole point.
Yeah, I think the coalition building was happening this yesterday. We had Brownsville ISD. I've heard so many positive things about Jackie Cruz, and she had 4 of her staff members there. We had Sherryland ISD, the child nutrition departments, and Mission ISD. We're all listening to Abraham talk about what he was been doing at PSJ. And you may not be a director yet, but that's in hopefully the very near future. But so I want to thank the UT RGV system for allowing this whole agroecology department to exist. And I am so encouraged to see so many young individuals that have gone through this program that have this appreciation for land, for healthy foods and this whole food system, and the teachers that have come out of it that are in the school districts that are able to take these students outside and have these experiences, Rocio. It's just, I'll take one step back. I'm sorry for kind of sidetracking, but it's very important. There was a student panel yesterday with 2 agroecology students and 2 high school students. And they were all talking about their experiences, and it got very emotional with these spaces, these garden spaces, these school farms. And the message to me was very clear that these school gardens are incredibly important for spiritual growth, for emotional growth, and singing is always good, and educational development, and as bad as it is, school districts' curriculum is driven by these darn STAR exams, but there are very simple ways to, all kids are having to learn about plant parts. And so instead of watching it up on a monitor, why don't you go pull some weeds out of the garden and look at the roots and the shoots and the leaves and the stems. But so I think there's so much synergy. There's so many good things that are happening. And I just think we need to continue with this coalition building, and all the support that we are getting from Region 1 and the different child nutrition departments, and really build that synergy and reach out through the entire Rio Grande Valley and our 8 counties, because we all have seen it. Obesity, diabetes, hypertension, it's all related to the habits of eating that we have and what our choices are and where that food comes from. I know, Carmen, when you were still there at Region 1, I guess the shift had been from the software for purchasing from TDA back to USDA, and we were looking at the food items that were being offered to come into child nutritions, and the labeling on it, literally it said materials list. Right? And I'm looking at,
as if it were a piece of equipment or a supply, like paper or a Xerox copier.
yeah,
So
instead
what
of
material do you want?
protein,
Right,
carbs,
yeah, it was just the
fruits,
material.
vegetables, it's
Yeah.
materials list. And it was processed, and I believe the word was extra processed.
Something, yeah,
Like that?
something like that. I tell Alan, of one of the 100,000 reasons why I decided to retire from the highly and overly regulated program, even though all I've known is child nutrition. I don't know how to do anything else. Well, I'm learning how to do something else now, right? But of the 100,000 reasons was I feel like I have such great respect for food, and I enjoy it so well, and I look at it and I study it, and I'm a foodie, I do enjoy my meals, but I feel like when I hang out with other people or even certain agencies, that the respect is not the same. And so I felt when I saw the USDA new website for ordering the materials, I thought, well, that's disrespectful, because that is meant to come down and nourish someone, right? And so it just became harder and harder for a child nutrition director to market these items as palatable, as something that was good for kids, right? And so on that, I want to segue into a marketing strategy or an outreach, and maybe UTRGV can tap into the business school to assist in how to get the word out, right? So Abraham is passionate. Obviously we're all passionate because we're here, but how do we transfer that over to the other individual that has the 101 things that they need to do on this day, but get in front of them and have a conversation about, possibly creating a coalition where we partner better with the farmers, right? So what would need to happen? And that was one of the questions that I asked earlier to Bella. I said, well, it's out of sight, out of mind. So as soon as the summit is over, people are going to leave, and the ones that participated came and they thought, this is fantastic. But 2 days from now, they're going to move on to other things. How do we get that momentum to continue, and also to educate others so that they can jump on board with the potential of a coalition?
So outreach has been the hardest part on my end. So even though, I manage our farm to school program, it's just myself, but I have a village behind me. I say that because we have dietitians, we have our lunch staff, we have our director, all these people have helped me get to where I am. So, but The bad side is, since it's only me, my outreach has been lacking, right? So how does outreach look for school districts? Mostly social media. I only do Facebook, so we have a page, and that's my only outreach. And it's very limiting because thankfully our parents, which are our main audience, is on Facebook, but we lose our young kids because they're on other platforms. So outreach has been something I really lack. And I say, if I don't post it, then it's like I didn't do it. And it's true, because there's so many things going on in a school district and so many things going on in the world that if we can't broadcast it, it stays in the dark. So that's been my efforts of kind of broadcasting it. And sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. But that's what I worry. I don't want this to, the unsung heroes, which are our staff, they're the ones doing the work. And I would love to highlight them. I would love to have them sitting here and say, what are your experiences, good or bad? That's what we learn from. But outreach is one of those things in mind that I want to get better at. If anyone has any better ideas how we can, highlight those, whether it be through a coalition, whether it be through Edible, whether it be through some form of newspaper, anyway, because we need those stories out there. We just need the right person to read it, to hear it, so we can move that needle over to the other side. So please help. And I'll
One
help
at
you.
a time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bella, do you want to address?
Yeah, I think that what's so clear is that the people who are in this room are going to be the ones that make that happen. What was so fascinating about the buyer-supplier event that happened on Thursday was the impact and the importance of support actors in buying and supplying. How can folks who aren't spending the money or growing the product help push the message that this is important, we need to focus on this? How can places across the board, across different facets of the food system, focus on this? And that will be what we talk about in the afternoon, right? What is our vision statement? What is the vision for the food system of the Valley? And how will we all work together to measure success, to promote success? What does that all look like? And so, I think this is where it begins. How do we keep it going so that 2 days from now, it's not forgotten? The point is to have all of us dig in more and more, and it doesn't matter if you're the buyer or the grower. This impacts you. Feeding young people impacts everybody. So focusing on that is important.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Alan, do you want to chime in on duplicating Allens and cloning?
Yeah, I've often said we need cloning machines for a lot of us to walk through, but I feel like that's happening kind of through this agroecology department. I keep kind of going back to it. I'm really amazed, Alex, the things that have happened, because I knew you when this whole thing first started, and I'm just incredibly, I'm incredibly, yeah. Hey, it's stressful, right? When we're taking hits, but we know that we're doing the right thing for people and planet. It's very obvious. But I think we do have energy. I think we have been digging in deep. So I am very encouraged. I think Region 1 we are poised to be in a position to be have a lot more leverage, and do understand, and I'll give compliments back to Dr. Daniel King, the executive director, who was the superintendent that hired me 10 years ago, and he likes to tell the story, well, Alan was always around telling us what we were doing wrong. We figured we'd just hire him on and shut him up, and hopefully we can do some things better. But he has grown Region 1, and May will be his second year, or 2 years of being the executive director, and we have grown in staff. We've doubled in staff. So we are creating new positions. This health and wellness is incredibly important, and our health and wellness department has grown substantially. And there is this collaboration, and I think what I'm really wanting to focus on is allowing all these 48 school districts to understand what UTRGV is offering as far as education that helps solve these food problems, that help solve our heat island effects, that help solve our diabetes and our obesity by getting more teachers comfortable with creating these spaces on school campuses. There was at the student presentation yesterday, I asked the question to them, how can you all help get school gardens into every single school in the valley and going up the state? And one of the responses was, well, we can't put more responsibility on a teacher because they're already busy and they don't have enough time to create a garden. And they're right. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, how many coaches that are in our school systems had to build a football field or a track field or a baseball field or a basketball court? None of them. So if we really look at our focuses, and I'm not saying that sports aren't incredibly important, but if we look at the overall funds that go into Texas education to athletics, and we were to take 3% of the total funds and put that into ecological gardens, food systems on school campuses, and made those connections to the local farms. Yesterday, I visited Shakira and Johnny's, the Tierra Prieta farm. First time I'd been there, heard wonderful things about it, and I'm walking in looking at all this wonderful food that's being grown there, and I'm looking off to the east, and I'm seeing, well, what school is this right here? And it's Edinburgh Memorial Middle School. And I'm thinking, well, how often do they come over to your garden? And Shakira said, they haven't yet. So those are to me, that I'm going right to next week. I will be at that school and talking to the principal and saying, hey, here's all these opportunities that are happening right here. And there's no reason not to be engaged in that collaboration, that coalition building, and that those partnerships. So.
Thank you. Thank you. What about, in talking about the collaboration, how can we identify those key players? I know Region 1 and Region 1 now offers the support. It's like a school district, because there's a department represented that mirrors the school district, and it's a very strong institution. But there are what we call some school districts that don't really come out to Region 1 that much, and those are the ones that are hiding in the shadows, and they're probably, like the Delta area, to give you an example, and they're probably the closest to these farms. So what kinds of ideas could be implemented to reach out to those quiet ones, the ones that we don't hear a lot, they don't come out a lot, and they're super close. I mean, they have the resources and the ability to implement a school garden, right? So what kinds of ideas can you share with the audience on how to conduct this outreach to get these folks out of the woodwork?
I think on the on the child nutrition side, I've thought about it because I want more parental involvement, right? If I do a garden day, a garden cleanup day, I'll get 4 or 5 parents if I'm lucky. But when they do donuts with dad, we'll have a whole parking lot filled with parents, right? But it got me thinking, if they're showing up to donuts with dad, why can't I have a little table there to send my message? So using that logic for our child nutrition departments, they must attend a meeting, right? An important meeting, a mandatory meeting, or maybe a meeting they go somewhere else, right, that they do want to attend. And that's where we get them, where they're already there. It may not be the primary reason for him to be there, but hey, I have you sitting down at the table. Let me talk to you about those meetings that you don't attend. That's just one of those ways we can find those, those that are busy, some that are smaller. Just because you're smaller doesn't mean you have less work. Sometimes you have more work because you're smaller, right? You have to fill in 2, 3, 4 shoes. So that's what I think we can start promoting ours, or the farm to school, or just anything in general, is finding where they're at and then giving them those 5 minutes, those elevator pitches, like, hey, you want to learn more? here we are. So that's just my idea. That's what I'm trying to do with parents. I want parents, I envision our parents being the ones advocating for the garden. And then we also have students. We should have our students, like Rocio students, advocating for these gardens. So that's things I'm lacking, so I learn from them. I love hearing about what works, what doesn't, and what we can improve on. So that's just one of the ideas I have.
Yeah, I loved what you said on Thursday about getting creative. I mean, I think that that's so crucial. And how do we not only get creative about it, but you were talking about the technical side and how can you, make it easier to get this done, and you have to get creative with it. And so by utilizing networks that already exist, by building more networks, how can we help make it easier on administrators, on food nutritionists, folks, on parents, on teachers? How can we make these opportunities present themselves with common sense, as we talked about in the beginning, right? It makes a lot of sense to do this and to work together on it. We have the list of the 48 school districts. It's not like that isn't right there. So how can we utilize places that entire focus is outreach and not put the burden on people who are already loaded with tasks and administrative things and paperwork and all of this, putting the burden on support actors to be able to be that person and getting creative and working with schools that are already doing it, reaching out to the 48 districts that are there and showing that this works, this happens, this is how we will help you. And that's going to be the pathway that's going to be more effective.
Yeah, so I think the smaller school districts maybe that aren't coming into Region 1 should be the easiest ones to really get to, should be, I understand. But, so, mapping, I'm very visual, so I do think that there needs to be a mapping of the Rio Grande Valley, where these farms are in relationship to that school district. And probably most of these farms have the families that are operating them or working within them have children that are in that school district. So I think that is, we need to be very strategic, and I'm happy to kind of help out with taking that on. I think when I first came on to PSJ, I met with Isela Chapa, who was a manager at Santa Ana National Wildlife Refuge, and she was saying, Alan, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has changed their perspective and strategy on getting people to come to the refuge system. So we realize that hasn't been working like we have wanted. We haven't built the constituency that we're wanting to build, and they were wanting to build a conservation constituency. So we're needing to take the refuge to the school districts. And that was our first collaboration that we worked on with an urban refuge program, where we wrote a grant. And Region 1, for those that y'all don't know, is very grant driven. This world, the Rio Grande Valley, is incredibly grant driven, and we are the center of the epicenter, we are the red on the middle of the bullseye for so much federal and state dollars to come into underserved communities, to places of high obesity, high diabetes. We really fit the demographics of that. So we went a very small grant, $43,560, split it between 3 schools, created these schoolyard habitats. The kids all came out, planted. We worked to integrate curriculum with the teachers, bringing the kids back out to study. This was more for conservation, native habitat ecosystems. So I see a very big tie and inclusion of the food systems, either in this proximity or on the perimeter, more of kind of also a permaculture approach to that. But I think we need to be more aggressive, and I will be pushing for it through Region 1 to try to reach out to these smaller school districts, because I think it's probably easier for a smaller school district with less students to buy from that local farmer and be able to get those foods back into to those kids.
100%, absolutely. So I hope this is we're coming to the conclusion of our panel, but we are going to open it up for questions. If anyone in the audience would like to ask any questions of the panelists, we have one over here.
I'd like to ask basically to you, Carmen, as your previous experience and role in Region 1, you were talking about the need to have the procurement side try to take some of the risk off of the farmers and maybe try to do some advance agreements. Just not sure, how can you do that in a system where you can't guarantee the bid of a farmer? Can you even at least tell them that there's a floor price that you'll buy at? Can you do that?
So I have a great example to that. I was helping a district with their procurement review, and the young lady that was gearing up for this review and was doing the procurement is very innovative. And she said, she had just started there, right? She came from another entity. And she said, I am going to do an annual bid. And I just, the room started spinning. Oh my God, we've never heard of that, And she said, I am going to assume the risk for the ups and downs. I'm going to cover that because I'd rather do this right the first time than have TDA come back and ding my contract and say it's unallowed. So I'm okay paying the little extra to cover that, knowing that it's going to fluctuate and it's going to go down. And so I completely respected that. That was a trailblazer. That was an innovator, and that was somebody that wasn't scared to do that, right? So are there a lot of districts that are forward thinking like that? I don't know. And yes, I understand the volatility. That would be something that could be embedded in the contract on what, worst case scenario, because you have weather related issues, you have, and it happens all the time, right? But that would be addressed inside of the document. I want to say that the district that I'm talking about might be present, I think, I'm not sure. Yeah, they are present. She's right. She's sitting right there.
And related to that, I'm curious, they just issued or had a press release or something earlier this week where TDA is now going to allow to specify Texas grown or local products. Do you see how long is that really going to take to get to those food service directors in those ISDs that don't play much with what's going on here?
Well, actually, that rule is related to the Buy American provision. And so in the past, school districts were required to complete an additional form. They bought, let's say, cilantro, right? And so they had to fill out a form and say, well, I bought it for one of two reasons. It was not available, it was very scarce, or the price was a factor, right? So then they would waive the Buy American provision. The new guideline says that there's a certain percentage of domestic product that needs to be in the menu. So that gives you still more leeway to keep your produce domestically grown. And then you also, that's another added feature that in your procurement document, you can say, you can add a mile radius to the deal, where you could say, I want to buy 100 mile, 200, 300, or actually the state of Texas, the TDA considers Texas local grown. So it can be in Plano, and you can buy that. So you award extra points using local grown as a preference, which is perfectly legal. I hope I answered your question. So we have 5 minutes left. If there are any other, I'm sorry, there was a gentleman over here. And then we'll come back to you, Jackie.
Well, my question, I guess, I'm a professor, I teach at UTRGV, but my research is on parental participation in community gardens, right? And one of the things, when I was up in Utah, I got involved with a middle school where the principal put the community garden in the actual school grounds, kind of like what you all are doing here, right? But one of the, I guess, one of the problems that I always saw was that the school always concentrates on, which I understand, right, because they're the ones who are providing the labor, are the teachers, and the extra work that teachers have to do to be in that garden. When in reality, right, it's not really extra work, because they're already, like you said, they're already doing a class on plant photosynthesis, and all you have to do is walk right outside a couple of steps and look at the actual process. But my question to, well, I guess both Abraham and to you, Alan, is what needs to change within District 1 and the school districts to change that conversation, like I said, because that's the research I've been doing. Because right now it's parent involvement. And parent involvement is very limited to show up when it's a teacher conference day, and maybe if I need a volunteer. But parents participate every day in their children's education. And one of the things that we've learned in this past 4 days is that farming, planting, growing it's something that all of us grew up with, right? Because we all know a grandma, mom, dad that has a garden at home, right? So they already have that knowledge. So what needs to change, I guess, up here, not as much down here, to change that conversation?
So for the schools, having the principal on board is very important, because if it's not part of the curriculum, they need permission to go outside. So that's something that if your school is not doing it, as a parent, go to your school, tell your principal, and they'll listen. That's something you can do as of tomorrow, as of Monday, right? The other one that I see more long-term based, and this is one of the many things I have to do, is add it to the curriculum. So how does that look like, right? Right now we're fighting for 15 more minutes of recess, and that's a struggle, right? But if the teacher were to have in their curriculum 20 minutes of outdoor learning, that opens the door to have classroom outside, where they're forced for those that don't want to do it. But for those that do want to do it, it gives them that break where they can go outside, right? That's curriculum side, and that's a whole nother story. But that's how I envision them to have the time during their day, because my teachers are going out during lunch. They're going after school, Saturdays, Sundays, and I don't want that, right? I understand they already have enough in their plate. So that's just one of the ideas you can get. But parents, you don't understand the power you have. It's tremendous in schools. If we have 2 parents complain, we'll get it done for sure. If we have 10, it's done. Like, you don't understand the power you hold, but also your kids. Your kids even have more power than you. Show up to board meetings. Show up with little pamphlets, and they'll listen, because they have to listen, because they're working for you. So understand the power that you have, juntos, somos más fuertes. So understand that we have power and we have to do something. My kids still don't go to school to PSJ, but once they do, I'm going to say, hey, I'm a parent. You have to listen to me. So that's what I recommend you do. And you're more than welcome at PSJ. You want to adopt a garden? We have 32, so take your pick. So thank you.
This week, AgriLife Extension had a meeting of the community to try to develop their next 5-year outlook and where the most community needs were. And community gardens came up. And any of y'all in here a master gardener? Yeah, there we go. Okay. I did in 96. But those master gardeners, they all need community hours. And they've all had to have security background checks. The way the atmosphere is today with the horrible things that have happened on some of these school campuses, security is very high. But these master gardeners, I've asked the AgriLife to say, allow those community hours to be put and focused towards schools that do have these gardens, that need somebody that knows, okay, that's a guinea grass, oh, that's a carrot, or that's cilantro, I don't pull that up. But there is some, in order to care for a garden space, there needs to be a little horticultural education and understanding of what you're looking at. Is it something we want to leave there, or is it something that we want to pull out? So, but I think that's a very low-hanging fruit with the master gardener and the community hours to get more of that involvement into these school gardens.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and Jacqueline had her hand up. I know there's, okay, we can make time for 2 more questions.
I'll phrase it differently. So I'm the publisher and owner of Edible Rio Grande Valley, which is a local food culture magazine. So my question was going to be how, in this idea of outreach, like a call to action, I do not have children, so I'll give you context there. In this idea of having parents come and advocating for y'all, would that make it easier for you? We just answered that question. So I'll almost pose my question differently. in this idea of what the magazine is to the community, I will offer that I would love to tell this story either from a child's perspective and how it's impacting them being in the earth, from dealing with the mental health component to just being out in nature, or from the perspective of yourself or the professor at UTRGV that's involved. We would need a writer to write this story, to kind of advocate and have that call to action, to have parents in the communities go to their schools and say, how do we get this? And kind of create momentum maybe from that side is what I'll offer.
Thank you so much. There was a gentleman in the back that, sorry, it was, yeah.
I guess going back to the parent-student involvement at the school districts, is there a way to get like a certification to their students or to the parents of these students saying, say they come, like the Master Gardener setup where they do 5 Saturdays or 5 check-ins with the school district and say, yes, I know how to feed my children. Yes, I know what food systems they are participating in, what they're eating, and then so on and so on with what kind of trees are on my campus, and then like giving each parent a certification saying, I'm confident that my student will be healthy, my child will be healthy. Because I know I'm asking this on behalf of my prior experience. We did that for college readiness, where a lot of the first gen students, their parents weren't college educated, and so we got them all involved, 50 at a time, 100 at a time, and then gave them a certificate at the end of the year saying, I'm fully aware and ready for that.
So for us, it would work. I actually thought about that. So for our kinder, they do a ceremony and our parents show up and we get every single parent there. And that would be a great way to target our kinder classes since they're graduating and they're presented with little certificates. It would be cool to have the student as well as the parent receive a certificate, whether it be, a gardener, whatever it may be, that could potentially work with us. And that's where we already have the parents there. We could get creative and present that award to the parent, and the parent gets some recognition. Maybe they didn't graduate, and that's as close as they'll get to a graduation ceremony. So, highlighting those parents that are willing to do the effort. So that's a great idea.
I think that there's a lot of value in providing a professional development certificate to an adult that is showing up at a school. And I would love to see that idea be transferred over to the adult education section at Region 1 that covers getting a GED, and they have a big old audience of folks coming in to get a GED in the evenings and Saturdays. And sometimes a lot of these learning opportunities have a requirement that you show up with something, right? Even the employment office used to have some requirement for some moms that would ask for them to document their volunteering so that they would show up as an effort to gain a skill, to get employment, or I could see the adult ed portion of it being as a component, even if it's like hey, you're going to get a CEU, or and that's going to amount to something. So I could see that happening.
Let me give one last shout out to Mission ISD. They have implemented a $1,000 stipend to a teacher in each elementary school that is kind of the garden coordinator. So it's $500 for their own pocket and $500 for materials to go into garden activities. And that is something I'm going to be promoting through Region 1 to other districts, because remember, all coaches get good stipends, but hardly any teachers get stipends for taking on these gardens. But Mission has done that.
Thanks for that. I know we're running a little bit over, but I want to give the gentleman, you had a question?
Well, my name is Stephen Yo. I'm a new farmer. So you're all doing a great job. So this program is really, essential for the new farmer. Because one of my concerns is I started growing, but I don't want to grow the big compost pile because I want to grow something that I can sell. So, but the school district is buying, food bank is buying, but is there any assurance and commitment like he was saying, the what price point, what quantity. Because I like to set up the organic process, but it can be expensive and it's going to be so pricey and then I can't sell. So you willing to pay retail price or maybe something that, hey, I'm organic, so I'm going to get some premium, right? So the other thing is the quantity. At least Ellen said 3%. Hey, we're going to set aside some amount, 30,000, whatever, so I can start a planning and reinvest it into the farm.
I think that that is where the opportunity for middlemen that are going against the grain, going against what we've always done, that's where that comes from, right? How can you work with small farmers and pay them what their product is worth? How you can do that is by being a broker, by working with folks that don't do the usual thing, go against the status quo of how we've procured food forever. And that is how we'll be able to address that issue. That's how we can pay farmers what their product is worth. And working with Region 1, working with these other coalitions of farmers, of buyers, that's how we can address that need.
All right, thank you so much. I will hand over the mic to Dr. Rosales.
Yes, let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much. And as they exit the stage and our next panelists come up, I would love to, just give those who just walked in a little bit of context. We are on day 2 of the Food Summit, and it's been a really successful event thanks in large part to a lot of the folks behind the scenes and, of course, the organizers. We have the National Center for Appropriate Technology who's here helping organize the conference. We also have the Institute for Ecology, Scholarship, and Health, who've been an amazing organizer of this event. And then finally, we have folks from UTRGV Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement. I'd like to invite our next guests up onto the stage.